Let's go ahead and get started. First, an intro. My name is Noah. I'm an enterprise advocate here at Halp. I'll be your guide over the next 50 minutes or so as we talk about Halp and how it works in Microsoft Teams. So 10,000 foot view about Halp is that it's a ticketing system that lives in the chat tool, right? So when you're installing Halp, you're installing it into Microsoft Teams in this case. And you can use Halp as a totally standalone ticketing system, which is what we're talking about today, right? Where all you need is Microsoft Teams in order to use Halp, and it's the entire system you're using for ticketing. We do also have integrations for other ticketing systems like Zendesk and Jira. Those integrations are bi-directional. So comments, status changes, assignment, custom fields that you map would all sync back and forth. Today, our focus is on Halp standalone. Just keep that in mind. If you're somebody who's using one of those integrations, think they're bi-directional. So a comment I'm making on the ticket in Halp is also hitting Jira and vice versa, or Zendesk, right? So the way that I tend to run these webinars is we're gonna mine some interactions that you might be having, and we're gonna start at the least process, and we're gonna get to the most process. So the least process, which you might be dealing with today, is that I'm somebody who needs help, and there might be like an email address I could go to, or there might be a portal of sorts that I could go to, but instead I just message the person I know. And I go, hey, like, can you help me do this? So that's the least process that we want to get away from, but we're going to use Halp to solve for it. That's where we're going to start, right? The middle ground is that maybe I go to a dedicated place in the chat tool for that, something like a channel. We'll touch on that. And then the best case scenario is I'm that same user, I know what I have should be a ticket, and I just make it. And I'm sort of really well behaved as a user, and I'm on my way, and I help the team solve it, right? By giving them the info they need. So that's my plan, least process to most process. As I said, I will stop along the way for questions. So just type those questions to me here, and I'll stop along the way to see them. So let's get into it. Just a little bit more preface here. You can see I've got my two Microsoft Teams windows open, and these are two users in the same tenant. So on the left, I'm in Teams as Mike, who is going to be the requester. That's going to, send us DMs, and he's going to post in channels, and he's going to ask for help. So this is our requester under Mike on the left. And on the right, I'm in Teams as Noah, myself, our agent. This is somebody who is going to resolve tickets, and it's going to be assigned tickets, and it's going to read and write private notes on tickets. So this is, for the purposes of our webinar, this is your profile on the right under Noah, right? So let's do it. Let's do that least process scenario, right? Like, I'm Mike, I need help. Instead of doing what I'm supposed to, I just message the person I know. So I message Noah, and I go, hey, I need help with XYZ. Can you do this? And I see this message from Mike, and I think, okay, well, this isn't the way that I want people to reach out, but it's going to happen, right? Instead of telling Mike, okay, like go send an email and do it properly, or instead of copy pasting this into a ticketing system for Mike, which is the last thing we want to do, what I can do is I can take his message and I can turn it into a ticket after the fact. In order to do this, you need to have rolled Halp out to your team, but I will get to that later at the webinar. So we see this message from Mike, we're using Halp. We say, all right, well, this should be a ticket. And if I use this more actions button, you can see it says create ticket with assist, and this is synonymous with Halp. So behind the scenes, it'll be called Halp. If you go to our website, it's called Halp. In the chat tool, it's called Assist, Atlassian Assist, right? So I say, all right, Mike, well, let me make a ticket for you and bring you back into a process. So I'll click create a ticket. And this is where you're introduced to the core concept of Halp, which is the queue. You can see it says, hey, select a queue for this request. And a queue is a group that's receiving tickets. In this case, it's a team that's using Halp. So I could say, all right, is it an accounts receivable thing? Maybe it's a bug and it should go to Jira. Maybe it's a sales thing and it goes to Zendesk, or maybe it's facilities, right? And then beneath this queue, if I click facilities, and we'll get more into the queues as we go through the webinar, you can see I now have the option to choose multiple forms. So this facilities form here is really simple. All it's asking for is an office location and an urgency and a summary. So I could plug these in. You could even make these more simple and say, hey, all I want is a summary. But for me, I'm requiring a little bit. This will be more useful when the user is filling out the form, right? Not when I'm doing it on his behalf. So we'll go ahead and I'll create the ticket. And when I do this, a few things are going to happen in Microsoft Teams. So for Mike, for the end user, you can see he gets this notification that Assist sent him a card. And if I click into that chat, this is where the requester side of the ticket lives. Right, so I'm going to go through what it looks like for Mike and what he can do on the tickets, and then I'll stop for questions before we get to the agent side over here and what I can do on the ticket. So get ready for those. So Mike gets his chat from the Assist app, and he can say, okay, I have a ticket now, and it's open, and this is my ticket number, and my title is that message that I sent off, right? I can see that I'm the requester, and right now it's unassigned. As Mike, there's a few important things to know about this interaction. The first is that this chat from the Assist app is private to just Mike. So if that's why he is chatting Noah in the first place, because it's sensitive info, it's not the kind of thing he wants to talk about in a channel or something, then it remains private for just Mike. And of course, the team that's going to fix it can see it too, right? So that's one important thing here is it's private for just that requester. The other important thing is that if Mike needs to do something on his ticket, he has a few buttons on the card that'll let him do that. And we're going to go through these. So of course, if it's a false alarm, he can close his own ticket and say, oh, never mind, there's no problem. If Mike wants to tell us more about his ticket, he can use this reply button and say, here's more info. This is what I've tried already. And as long as he's using that reply button, that message is going to be synced with this specific ticket. So when the facilities team or the IT team or whoever's working on it sees this, they'll see that reply from Mike. When I reply back to Mike, and I'll show you this card is where Mike is going to see that reply land. So the whole conversation just happens on this card, right? Of course, Mike can attach a file if there's a screenshot or something that's relevant to his ticket, and he can also click view details. And if I click view details, you can see it's taking me to the tickets tab, or excuse me, the tickets page of my Assist tab, where I can see a little bit more about my ticket. And I can say, okay, here's those fields that were on the ticket that were filled out. Here's a little bit more about the ticket, like some timestamps. And this is also where, as a requester, as an end user, I could get a bird's eye view of the tickets that I've requested. So if I've got a few things that are in flight, I could come here and say, hey, well, I want to look at stuff that was created, least recently, and look at my first ticket ever and say, hey, what's going on with this? Why isn't it done? Or I could look at my most recent ticket and check in on it and say, oh, that's 337, and see what's going on with that one as well. So that is the basic back and forth for the end user. Let's take a moment to talk about email, because the setup for that's really easy. And that sort of falls outside of my least to most process, right? Like email is it can be a backup or it can be the primary. Like maybe some group of users are really good about emailing a support address. That's great. At least they're trying to make a ticket. They're not just shooting a message off into the ether. Or maybe somebody gets locked out of Teams, right? And we need to, and they still need to submit a request, right? So let's talk about email briefly. And I'm going to give you all a peek behind the scenes of my Halp account to do that. So in my Halp account here, this is where I can look at my queues and toggle various settings for queues and enable certain fields and forms for queues and so on. So we're going to get into queues here. We have fields, we have a recipe builder, which is our trigger system that we're going to get into, billing, integrations, all of this. We also have an email page. Now for email support, what you would do is you would set up the address that you're currently using. So maybe people are emailing like, helpdesk@company.com. You'd plug that in to your Halp account here. And then in that address, so like not in Halp, but in the Gmail or the O365 that you're using, you would set up that address to forward to the inbound address for your account. That's what's making a ticket in our system, right? And once a ticket's created by email, it's going to land in all of the places I'm about to show you. So it'll land in Microsoft Teams. It's going to land on our tickets page in the web, which I'll show you. And when I reply on that ticket, the requester gets my message as an email back, right? So I know that was sort of a long-winded explanation, but at the end of the day, it ends up being a normal interaction for that user who sent the email. Your team just has it as a ticket, and you happen to be replying from Teams or from our interface. And yes, there's a mention here that says that Mike needs to install the bot. We're going to get to how to roll this out to people. There's a few ways to do it. So we'll talk about that too. All right, so what have we done? We turned a direct message, a chat, into a ticket. We saw what it's like for the end user. We talked about how email works, and I'll circle back to that once we get to the agent side. Now, for the team that's going to resolve the ticket, there's a few places you could work on requests. Like I said at the start, there are those integrations that are bi-directional. So if you're using an integration for Zendesk or Jira, you could work on the ticket from that system like you always have, and things are going to sync back and forth. In Halp on its own, right, you still have a few options, and one of them is in Microsoft Teams itself. So we sent that ticket to facilities, right, and you can see that the facilities team here is lit up. So if I click into this is where the agent side of that ticket is going to land in Microsoft Teams. And the idea is that you're in that team with the 3 or 4 or 5 or however many other people work on those kinds of tickets. So we can all swarm them together now and say, hey, like, I'm available, I signed it to myself. The rest of my team can see that I'm accountable now. They don't have to worry about it. And that's going to update, that's going to update for the requester too. And just like Mike, come on, get out of the way here. Just like Mike can reply on the ticket, I can do the same. So I'll reply back to Mike and I'll say, thanks, we're on it. And he's going to get my message on his card over here. There we go. One thing I can do, well, there's more that I can do as an agent, but one small thing that I can do that's really important is if I want to send a reply, I can mark it as a private note, which means, of course, it's still tracked on the ticket, but it's not going to be sent to our end user. So I could say, I think the issue is this, but I'm not sure, right? Leave a note for another agent. It's still on the ticket. I'm not having to go somewhere else and leave the ticket to discuss it. It's just that Mike is not going to see that message, right? I can also attach a file myself. I can assign it, I can close it, and I can edit the ticket from here. And if I click edit, it's taking me, just like it did for Mike when he clicked view details, it's taking me to that tickets page in the Halp tab where I have a few more options. I could change the title. We'll say like, let's give this like Wi-Fi issue, and we'll leave it as pending for now, and we'll leave me as the assignee, but we could change those. I can see some more fields, some timestamps, any other fields that might have been left. There is one really important thing here. Let's go ahead and save those actually. You can see that these links here give me 2 different options. One of them is to jump back to the conversation. So just go back to that ticket that we were just looking at in the web. The other, and I could do it from here too, the other lets me jump, come on, Wi-Fi. The other lets me go in the web. So let's go there next. So let's say I'm working on this ticket and now I actually have to do some real heavy lifting, or like maybe I'm working on tickets all day today. Instead of going to Microsoft Teams, I could also work on tickets from our web interface. So this is that specific ticket. This is 337. And from here, I can do all the same stuff and more. So I'll reply to Mike. I'll say hi from the web. Oop, if I can type, hi from the web. I could make a private note. I could add a file, right? I can also add any field here that's either global or is on that form. So I'll come in and I'll say, you know, there's a Wi-Fi issue in Office New York, and it's, you know, this is the impact, and yada, 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 and I'll add all of these things. One more thing that's really important from here that you can't do for Microsoft Teams as of today is I also have the option to add a follower. And a follower is our analog for a CC in Microsoft Teams. So let's say like I get removed as the assignee because it can't be both. And I get added as the follower. What's going to happen is, and I should mention, a follower could be anyone in your Microsoft Teams tenant. It doesn't have to be an agent. So maybe like I'm not somebody who actually works on tickets. I'm just somebody who occasionally needs to see a ticket and say yes or no. Like once or twice a month, I do that. So instead of paying for that person, you add them as a follower. And what's going to happen is that follower gets a chat from the app, and you can see they're sort of a CC on this request. And replies are still synced with the ticket, and I can reply from here as the follower. And that's an easy way to loop in people who maybe need to give their 2 cents, but aren't somebody that is working on tickets regularly, right? So you can do all of this from the web, right? And I mentioned it, but maybe I've got tickets all day today. And instead of working from Microsoft Teams, I actually want to work from a list of tickets. That's when I might go to my tickets page in Halp. And this is our more traditional interface. So I could come in here and look at it with no filter and just click into those tickets and send replies and see replies, or maybe even bulk action them and say, hey, that ticket, actually move it to a queue, change the status, change the assignee, or archive like it's a test ticket or something. I could also build out a filter for myself. So maybe it's 8 a.m. and I know I've got tickets all day. I'll say, hey, I only care about facilities tickets where I am the assignee. Come on, there we go. Where I am the assignee and the status is this, or the requester is that, or the form that they filled out is this. And this becomes my list of tickets to work through, right? So you've got options here. We're going to circle back to this tickets page when we get to reporting, but it's a really good way to get that bird's eye view and move tickets around or work on them or make a list for yourself. Let's circle back to this one and let's go ahead and close it. We'll say it's done now. That status change to closed, it's obviously hitting the triage channel here. The rest of my team can see that it's done. They don't have to worry about it. It's updating for our requester too, so he can see that it's closed, right? And if he goes to this tickets page, it'll show that status as closed for him. And of course, if you're using one of those integrations, Zendesk or Jira, we're mapping to that status too. So resolve it or solve it or whatever it's called in that system. All right, so that was the full round trip of the ticket in Microsoft Teams, and we spent a little bit of time in the web. Right? So you could use Halp on its own, where it is basically just a bot for Teams. And you've got a whole ticketing system as part of that, right? And you pay for it, and it's a service and all of that. It could also be part of your bigger ITSM solution, right? So if you're using Jira Service Management, then we also, in addition to everything I've just shown to you, we can also integrate with that system bi-directionally. So it could be both. So let me show you what's happening behind the scenes for the integration. So I have a Jira Cloud site integrated with Halp, which is really easy to do. Just authenticate that site. And I've got a Bugs project connected and a Help Desk project connected. And you can see those here. So what you're doing when you're using the integration is you're connecting a queue to a Jira project. So if you're, for example, I've got a Bugs team, and you can see that I've got it connected to a Bugs project in Jira, and these are those request types that have actually been pulled in from Jira. So I didn't have to build out these forms at all. I just said, hey, these are the 5 kinds of tickets we can make in that Jira project, make them in Microsoft Teams, right? And I've got the same thing for my Help Desk team. where I've pulled in Jira service management request types. So I can make any of these tickets now. So let's talk about that middle ground as we go through this question, right? So let's say I'm Mike again, and I'm a little bit better than I was last time. So instead of chatting the person I know, I'm going to go to this ask for help team. And beforehand, what I would have done, not as Mike, but as like the Halp installer who's setting things up, is I would have managed this team and I would have added the Assist app to this team. And what that does is it lets anyone in this team make tickets themselves. And one of the ways that can happen is Mike comes here and he goes, hey, I think I found a bug. And I'll reply to Mike and I'll say, like, just to keep miming this, I'll say, use the ... to submit ticket to bugs team. So Mike's going to roll over his own message, create a ticket with Assist. Instead of choosing facilities, we'll choose the bug queue. That's the one that's connected, right? You can see those are those fields, or excuse me, those request types, those issue types that we pulled in. I'll say it's a task, or actually we did say it's a bug, didn't we? And you can see those required and optional fields are just automatically pulled in. So I'll say, let's see, I'll say this is the description and the due date and the environment and the label and the priority and so on. And really all that's required is a summary. So I'll go ahead and I'll click create a ticket. Basically everything that we've done is identical to here. What's different for the request team side is that we get this message that says, hey, a ticket's been created. Go look at your chat from the Assist app. So I bring this up because even if it's something that you're reporting in a team in front of the whole company or however many people are there, once it becomes a ticket, it becomes private for just that user. So we're not going to gunk up that channel with like a million messages that are, not relevant to everyone else. So it's basically identical to what we've seen before. What you'll notice, what's different is that we've got this bugs ticket number here, and we've got that on the dev side too that actually resolves the ticket. And if I were to click through, and we'll see if I'm actually logged into Jira here, I am. This is, instead of sending me to the web, it's sending me to Jira, and I could work on it from here and say hi from Jira and send that message or change the status or do any of the things I mentioned, custom fields, status, comments, that kind of thing, assignee, and it's syncing back. Let's take a moment to talk about, email before I forget. That best case scenario triggers reporting and we'll keep on going, right? So we talked about email. When you have that set up and things are forwarding to the inbound address, I mentioned those are making tickets in our system. So they would land in the triage team, like every ticket will. They'd land on the tickets page, like every ticket will. And if I were to, let's say this ticket in facilities was created by email, it would say so here. And if I reply on the ticket, they get my message as an email back. And the same is true from the web, right? We talked about the middle ground here, right? And in this case, it's not the best case scenario, but it is better because now Mike is filling out the ticket himself and he's going to tell us all those fields. I don't have to ask him hey, what office are you in and so on. So part of the reason that's a better scenario is that Mike is doing the heavy lifting there, but also we can build useful triggers based off of the fields he's filling out or even the form itself, right? So let me show you what I mean. So I'm in my Halp account. We have this recipe builder page, and this is our trigger system. It's an if-then builder, right? So you get a lot of default ones that are changing the status based on who's replying, right? You can also create new ones, and we'll say, hey, if the custom field category equals X, then add somebody as a follower on the ticket, assign it to somebody, sync it with an integration. Set the status, set the field, send it to a queue, or my favorite, send a message on the ticket. So maybe we say hey, you filled out the field password reset on your ITL form. And I could say, hey, we see you asked about resetting your password. Here's here's the doc on doing that. And you can use a bit of Microsoft Markdown to like hyperlink that, right? Or hey, like maybe you filled out the form, HR, right? Send a message that says, hey, we received your request. Like this is our, SLA. Then this is when you should expect to hear back to us. Or hey, you filled out the form, whatever. Like call this number. So you can do a bit of deflection this way, solve easy questions, direct people somewhere else, do whatever you need to, right? And that leads me to the best case scenario where I'm Mike and I know what I have should be a ticket and I just make it. And what that looks like is wherever I am in Microsoft Teams that has this new conversation button, I can click this icon here, this little like Halp Assist Life Preserver icon. And it's putting us into that same exact flow we've seen before, where we choose a queue. We'll say it's a help desk 1. We fill out a form. We get a ticket. It's private for just Mike. It's always private for the requester. And is sent to the corresponding team, right? So this is what we want people to get to is I don't chat the person I know. I just click that button. It's still private for just me. It's just easier for everyone involved. Now, the reason that there's this whole spiel to get there is when you install Halp in Microsoft Teams, Microsoft doesn't let us just put this in their toolbar right away, right? There's a few ways it can happen. And I'm going to share a doc with you from our Help Center that I think is the most important doc. And that is enabling end users to create their own tickets. And I'm going to talk through them, but just save that doc, right? So the biggest hammer that you're going to see in that doc there is using an app policy to roll out Halp to Microsoft to everyone in your tenant. So you just say, hey, we're going live. Everyone's got it. Everyone in our tenant has this little icon in their toolbar. We don't have to worry about it, right? That's the biggest hammer. Rolling slightly back from that is using the request team that I mentioned earlier, where when we added the Assist app to the team, everyone in this team can make tickets here. And what's important is in addition to everyone being able to roll over a message in this team, by the merit of being in a team where you've added the Assist app, you also get the little icon in your toolbar, right? So that would be like if you on a per team basis, you want to roll it out and say, hey, we have an Office A request team, let's make an Office B request team, and so on. Now, the smallest hammer, which is more for if you want somebody to be the tester with you, or there's a specific user that for some reason needs to do it this way, you can always go right to the app section and click on Assist and click add. And that would be like one user at a time, right? These are all listed in that doc that I share with you, but it's important to know if you can do the app policy, I think it's a great way to do it, right? All right, I've done a lot of talking. So let me rubber duck it really quick. So we did a chat. We turned a ticket into a chat into a ticket. We worked on it as an agent. We did that in the web. We did request teams. We did the best case scenario. We talked about triggers. We talked about followers. So let's talk through reporting, right? It's kind of the biggest thing, right? If there's like 1,000 messages in Microsoft Teams every month that should be tickets but never become them, then you're missing out on that data, right? And there's a few ways you can do reporting in Halp. Keep in mind, and this is a recurring theme with the integrations, because we are making real tickets in Zendesk or real tickets in Jira, you'll get their reporting too, right? So if you're using an integration, you get the reporting from the system you're integrating with. If you're using Halp standalone, you have a few options for reporting. The first is on the tickets page, where we can build out a good filter for ourselves, or say no filter. We can take a list of tickets, export it as a CSV. This is the most manual option for reporting that we have, but it is also the most flexible, right? You take that CSV, plug it into another system you're using, plug it into Tableau, or just slice and dice in the CSV, right? Whatever you want to do with it. In the CSV, you're going to get standard ticket data, title, status, assignee, requester, custom field, that kind of thing. You're also going to get timestamps for when the ticket was created, when it was first responded to, when it was resolved, right? So the CSV is the most manual, but like I said, the most flexible. And we also have a reports dashboard. And this is the at a glance bird's eye view, where I can say, hey, you know, for the month of May, I want to look at all tickets across the board and see how many were created, as well as our average response and resolution time. I can also stack or filter by queue or assignee. So I can look side by side and see how teams are doing, look side by side and see how certain assignees are doing, or filter, like I said, and only look at one and say, oh, hey, the help desk team only got 2 tickets, neither of them are resolved yet, and so on. All right. So I think we've covered quite a bit of it. We talked about triggers. Like with integrations, because we're making real tickets in Zendesk or Jira, you would also be able to leverage like Zendesk triggers and Jira automations on these tickets. So keep that in mind. Our trigger system is just if then. Systems you might integrate with are if and, right? If and then, and they go on forever. I would like to take a moment to talk about the billing for Halp and how the pricing works. There are some things we do slightly differently. So there's no cost of implementation because we don't offer implementation services. Right? So Halp is a self-serve product. You are the one who does the implementation and the setup. It's much easier than you might think. There's an onboarding flow that gets you set up with the basics, and we have lots of documentation to help on, you know, all the, oops, that's not what I meant, all the questions you have, and I can just send you the team section of it here. Halp price, though, the way that you would, the cost of Halp for you is a per agent price. So you get unlimited requesters and triggers and channels and tickets and all of that. You only pay based on the number of agents, so the number of people that need to be assigned tickets, right? And on our pricing page, we have a useful calculator here where you can type in the number of people you have and look at it monthly or annually, right? And see how that works. Where things start to get different, and I promise I'll circle back to that question in the chat, is how we determine who's an agent. And the way that Halp knows who's an agent is based on the membership of your triage teams. So when you set this up, it says it, but the triage teams, so like the IT triage and facilities triage and so on, these teams should always be private because you want to control who's a member, right? So if we have an IT team and there's 5 people in this team, by the merit of being in this team where tickets land, meaning I can work on them and do everything I need to, I'm counted as an agent and I'm part of your billing. What's important here, there's 2 things. One is that we only count unique agents. So you're not double or triple billed, right? Like I'm in every single team that's using Halp, right? Like in this theoretical world, I'm like the admin of admins who just touches every ticket. Even though I'm in multiple triage teams, I'm only one person. I only count as one agent, right? You're not double or triple billed that way. The other little nuance here is that there's fine-grained permissions between teams. So let's say like HR is using Halp, but those teams need, those tickets need to be totally locked out. Like nobody else can ever see those tickets ever, apart from the 2 HR people. So if I'm not in that specific team, if I'm in facilities, marketing, IT, but not in HR, I can't see those tickets. I can't see them in Microsoft Teams, and I can't see them in the web. Triage HR just wouldn't show up for me on this list of tickets to look at, right? Now, the last little pricing that I have for you before I circle back to the questions is we do have a billing page here, and every trial is on premium. So by default, this is what you test, right? Here you can choose your preferred tier, your preferred term. Annual comes with a 2-month discount. Based on the number of seats that you have, the number of agents that you have, it's going to show you a total cost, right? Now, the big tip for you is because every trial is on premium, if you click standard, it'll tell you, hey, you have this premium feature enabled. you have these premium features enabled, right? So you could look at this and say, oh, hey, like those features do matter to us. Sounds like premium's the right path. And then I know it's the right path. Or I look at those and I say, hey, actually, I don't care about any of those, right? And so let's turn those off. And then I know I'm good to move to standard. Or maybe you have no premium features enabled and then it says nothing when you go to standard and then you know you're good, right? So the best bet is to come here when you're done with your trial. If you want to move forward, just plug in your credit card, right? And you're on your way. Now there's a question here that says, if I change the requester, what happens to the assist chat of the original requester? Does he receive further updates? Let's do this. That's a really good question. So let's say that I submit a ticket, and we'll actually let's do it here. Let's say I submit a ticket, and we'll say it's facilities, and it's this, and Noah is the requester, and I'm in this location. It's this urgent. So we're starting with me as the requester. I get my chat, right? And now let's say we change it. We'll say, okay, Noah is actually not the real requester. Actually, come on, Wi-Fi. Actually, it's Mike. So what you're going to see here is that Mike gets this chat from the app, right? And now that I'm no longer the requester, it's not in my chat here, so I wouldn't be notified further. I could be added as a follower, right? Like if you want somebody to be looped on a ticket, you could, but when you're changing the requester, that's more of a like, hey, this is a full change from one person being notified to a different person. All right, so I see there's one more question here. Let me just close the loop on it for anyone that needs to run. I know we're almost at time. Oh, here's one before we close it up. There's a question about how to use SLAs, and you probably saw this happening here, right? That's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up. SLAs are something that can happen at the queue level. So it's not like a global thing where everyone has to share the SLA. One team could have one SLA, another team could have a different one. So if we look at the facilities one in my queue, where we see our agents and our fields and our forms, which you can customize, right? We didn't get into this, but these forms are totally customizable. You can make things required, add and remove fields and so on. We have an SLA builder here where I could create an SLA and I could say, hey, or actually, sorry, SLA 2, right? And I'll say if a ticket is in the open state and has this custom field, let's find a good one, like change type equals X, right? After 30 minutes, and you could add more condition, after this period of time, it will have reached SLA. You can choose to respect the working hours that you can set in Halp and say, hey, only count time when the ticket is once our working hours start, right? And you can also choose to send additional notifications when it's about to breach, which is what you're seeing here, right? There's a question here that asks about ticket being created from an email address. Yep, that's something you can set up in your Halp account. You can plug in an email address, set it up to forward to this inbound@halpmail.com address. That's going to make a ticket by email. When you reply, that user gets an email back. There's a question here that says, can I reactivate tickets once they are closed and archived? So a closed ticket can be reopened. Archive ticket, off the top of my head, I don't know. I can send you this archive doc, which might have that answer, but a closed ticket, yes, you can reopen. And see, there's a button here for me to reopen. There's a question here that says, can I link tickets? Halp doesn't have any kind of ticket linking now, unfortunately. So yeah, there's not a way for us to do that yet. There's a question here that says, can I export all archive tickets? So let's take a look. So you can filter by archived here, and I don't have any archived tickets, but you should be able to then export according to that filter. All right, looks like we're good. Thank you all for joining. I'll go ahead and I'll turn off the webinar now. Thank you all. Thanks for listening to me talk for an hour. Bye for now.